One of the most highly anticipated VR titles of the year is with us, as Reach has launched on PSVR 2, PC VR, and Meta Quest headsets. Now, there's already been some discussion online about the difference in graphical fidelity between the 3 different versions of it, but right here on 131XR, we're going to talk about the Meta Quest version, specifically the Meta Quest 3 S. So if you've got a Meta Quest 3, the game that we've played is the game that you'll be playing. We recently had the launch of Memoriam on Meta Quest headsets, which is said to be Dead Space in VR, or a game that wants to be Dead Space in VR. And if that's true, then Reach wants to be Mirror's Edge in VR. And just like Memoriam, it does a pretty good job of reaching its goal. In the run-up to the release of the game, nDreams Elevation have told us that it's a full-body experience, a fully immersive, full-body VR experience. And honestly, they're not too far off. In the game, unlike most VR titles, you don't just see your hands, or even just your hands and arms. You do see your full body, including your legs. And there's some interesting skeletal design going on as to the way in which your legs maneuver when you're interacting with objects. The game is a parkour simulation, hence the comparison to Mirror's Edge. There is combat, but it's more of an aside, and we'll get to that in a bit. The bulk of the game is about finding a point from A to B and doing it as swiftly and potentially as stylishly as you possibly can. This involves running and jumping and climbing and crawling, and frankly, that climbing mechanic is the best we have seen in VR. It was early days in VR when the Climb from Crytek launched and basically set the standard for everything that has come in the years since. The climbing mechanics in a game called The Climb, as you can imagine, were pretty good, but it stayed pretty similar the whole way through since that launch. Reach takes it to the next level. It improves this climbing mechanic and, in my opinion, will become the new default for climbing in VR games from this point on. It's not terribly different to what you're expecting. Using the grip buttons on the controllers, you move your arms onto an object, press that button, and you'll be connected to it, and you can pull yourself and maneuver around from that point. However, almost any object you can connect with in the game. So it could be a desk edge or a PC desktop or areas you're actually supposed to climb maybe. And all of these become platforms for you to then move on from. It's not a simple case of this is a climbable item, do your climbing thing, and then move on. It is inherent in everything that you do in the game. At some point, if you're smart enough, maybe you can start integrating it into combat, tactical, whatever. I'm not that smart, I didn't. But there is potential there for you to do that because it is literally every single object. And unlike the recently launched Blackgate, which is up here, you never are worried about the object that you're trying to connect with won't be a connectable object. It is everything. So obviously, when climbing and jumping and so on are integral parts of the core gameplay loop, it's great that this is a solid foundation to start from. The running is, as you would expect, click the button, off you go. The jumping it takes a little bit of getting used to, but it does work. Essentially, rather than just pressing the button to jump, you have to hold the button and then swing your arms to gain momentum. This is fine. It takes a little bit getting used to, like I say, because you're not just pressing the button, you're holding it and then doing a motion. But what is actually pretty cool about this is if you have a series of jumps in quick succession, you don't have to hold and release. You can just hold the button and swing your arms. And obviously that button is locking into the idea that the next motion you do is to launch a jump, rather than simply be you moving your arms, say, for example, to aim your weapon. So it's a simple and somewhat elegant solution to, motion controls that are sometimes a bit unwieldy. As you progress through the game, the combat does open up significantly. You get access to all kinds of new weapons and sci-fi gadgets, and it does make for a more interesting combat system. However, it still always remains second fiddle to that momentum-based gameplay. The combat is a bit lackluster, especially when compared to the mechanics and techniques that Reach is actually pushing forward. It's a shame, because by and large, Reach is a fantastic experience, let down by some poor implementation of combat. You begin the game with a bow, and it plays like most bow and arrow games in VR, but the difference here is that the enemy AI is woeful. There was a point right in the tutorial where you burst through a door and several guards come at you, and I took out multiple guards and only had one remaining, and that guard was stood there shooting completely in the wrong direction, even though he'd obviously know where I was and I'd run past him, he'd seen me, he'd shot at me before, but I turned around to take him out, and he was clueless. And this happens all too often in the game. If you're taking this as a game that is going to be a first-person shooter adventure game, you're wrong. That's not what Reach is. Reach, like Mirror's Edge, is about the parkour and the navigation, the movement, much, much more than it is about any kind of combat or any kind of adventuring. It is a game that makes you feel like you're in this world with a specific set of skills, and combat is not one of them. As far as the story is concerned, you're cast as this character, Rosa, and, I mean, it's interesting, but nDreams aren't breaking any new ground here. The game changes its setting and takes you to all these kind of different locations through mythical worlds and so on, and it's supposed to be quite dynamic, but I didn't see any of that. Frankly, it is a game that's about getting from A to B, and that is cool. That's all it needs to be. We don't need any more hyperbole or buzzwords around it. The game performs exactly what you want it to when it comes to that adrenaline rush, navigation, movement, speed, parkour. These are the buzzwords that we should be using for this game. Now, just to touch on those graphics a little bit, on the MetaQuest 3S, which is the headset that we reviewed on, there's nothing particularly wrong about the visual quality of Reach. It does a good job. Every item in the game is recognizable for what it is. There are tons of interactive items, not just ones that you can grab and maneuver upon, but like incidental items that you can pick up and look at, but ultimately do nothing. But the fact is, like most of nDreams games, everything that exists in the world of Reach has the same rule set applied to it. The same physics, the same interactability, and for that, the sense of immersion is unparalleled. So I'm sure we'll see a lot of complaints online over the next few weeks about Reach's combat being lackluster, the storyline being largely ignorable, and the graphics being okay. But doing so is missing the finer point of what Reach is actually doing. It is progressing those climbing systems and the movement systems in VR, running at a very fast pace with no signs of simulation sickness at all. And the variety of accessibility and comfort options is fantastic for someone who does potentially suffer from simulation sickness. So let's concentrate on those elements of the game. Let's talk about what Reach gets right, because what it does get right, it pushes the boundaries for. And for that, if you're someone that is experienced in VR or wants to see something new or just something refined to the point where it progresses past other titles that have done similar, Reach is definitely one you should be checking out. If you're wanting a more action-oriented experience, then this isn't it. But not every game needs to be action-focused, and Reach is doing stuff in VR that other games will definitely want to be copying.